Hey, welcome back to Burt's Basics, Buckseller High School, Medical Anatomy and Physiology. Well, congratulations, you are finishing up the unit on chemistry, and now we're jumping into the world of organic chemistry. So today's lesson is Standard 2, Concepts 10 and 11. We're doing organic versus inorganic, the big four, carbs, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids, and being able to tell them apart from each other. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start with inorganic versus organic. That's probably a good place to start. So this is your periodic table. I'm hoping by now you feel a little more comfortable with it. By far, my favorite element of all time, no matter what, is this guy right here, PB, Peter Burt, also known as plumbum. Okay, plumbum, okay, that's lead. I hope you have your favorite guy here, but I'm just telling you, when you go to college, there's going to be two chemistries to choose from. You're going to either have to take inorganic or organic. Most freshmen will start off with inorganic chemistry, which generally entails this whole periodic table. Then you learn sodium and magnesium and potassium and calcium over here, nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine. You learn so many cool things in inorganic chemistry. It's a lot easier to define organic first than everything else is inorganic. To be organic chemistry, you only got to have two people, and only two. You got to have those two. In order to be organic chemistry, you must contain carbon and hydrogen. If you do, you're organic. If you don't, you are inorganic. So test questions that are tricky. Is water inorganic or organic? Well, let's see. Does water contain carbon? Nope. So it is inorganic. So you might think, well, why would I ever take a science that is only on two things? For reasons like this. Get ready for that bad boy. These are three different types of sugars. You can see glucose, fructose, galactose. On a piece of paper, they look confusing because they're all C6H12O6. So they all have exactly the same elements. But the problem is, if you look very closely, they change a little bit. Can you see how this oxygen's up here, this oxygen's down here? And then if you look over here, this OH is in the wrong place. This is hydrogen over here, this OH over here. You change your shape, you change everything. So if you're going to take organic chemistry, you got to know the big four. And the big four are all these guys. They're carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. So on each one of these four, we're going to talk about them briefly. You need to know their structure and their function. So let's start with carbohydrates. So carbohydrates, in most books, they're written like this. They're written in a linear form, so you can see all the carbons, all the hydrogens, all the oxygen. It is organic because I see carbon and I see hydrogen. The real trick is they're never like this in real life. They fold on each other. So if you follow across this pathway, you can see they fold, they fold, they fold, and eventually they form a ring. So on every diagram you're ever going to see, carbohydrates are always a ring-like shape. Now you might be asking, hey, where'd all the carbons go? Because I only see one. Every time there's an intersection and you don't see anything labeled, that is a carbon. So these are all different types of sugars. So you should recognize this one, deoxyribose, and this one, ribose. Those might come in handy when we talk about one of the other organic compounds. But for now, let's do our vocab. The word saccharide means sugar. So if you are a monosaccharide, you are one sugar. If I put two of these guys together, we call it now a disaccharide. When we put a ton together, we call it a polysaccharide. We eat polysaccharides, noodles, breads, grains, pasta, those are all polysaccharides. Every sugar, not every sugar, but almost all sugars end in ose. I think all sugars do. So if you ever hear a word you've never heard before, like what is deoxyribose or what is maltose, you already know that since it ends in ose, it is a sugar. So if we go to our next one, its function. This is the function of carbohydrates. You can see glucose right there is going to go into my cells, and mitochondria are going to harvest energy from it and make the almighty ATP. Carbohydrates are my quickest form of energy. Carbohydrates are my quickest form of energy. They're the easiest for my body to use, rip apart, and make ATP. Carbohydrates, check. Let's talk about proteins. Okay, proteins tend to be a little more complicated, so let's look at our protein structure. In order to be a protein, you are organic, because check it out, you got a carbon right there, and you got a hydrogen, and you have this structure. Now, in class, I always make people look for the letter R on the periodic table, but they can't find it, because it doesn't exist. The R stands for a side chain, which we'll get to in just a second. But if you guys understand some basic chemistry, do you see this NH guy? This NH guy on this side is called an amino group. That's called an amino group. If I go over to this side, this H will pop off in the form of H plus when it bonds with somebody. So if you hear H plus, what am I thinking? What am I thinking? Oh, that's right. H plus is acid. Hence, this is why this is called, you ready for Sesame Street? Amino acid. Okay, so remember, sugars were called saccharides, not proteins. Proteins are called amino acids. They all have this structure. The only difference in amino acids is whatever is coming off the R group or my side chain. So if you look over here, every green box is a side chain. Every purple box is another side chain. So methionine is an amino acid. Okay, phenylalanine, that's its real name, is an amino acid. The only difference is they have the same structure on the top. They just change their side group. Now, when we keep going on protein, there are 20 amino acids in the world. My body is awesome at putting together most of them. So my body can put together 11 of the 20. We call those non-essential. Now be careful, that does not mean they're not important. We need all 20, but my body can make 11. So we call those non-essentials. That means the remaining 9, man, I got to get in my diet somehow. Those 9 that we have to eat are called essential amino acids. So if you look over here, let me get my face out of the way. Here you have your amino acid 1, there's your side chain. Amino acid 2, there's your side chain. When they bond together, we don't call it a disaccharide because that's a sugar. We call it a dipeptide, which then means this is where your words go from here. Pep is a vocab word for protein. And then if we keep reading, these are where the words go. Amino acid is 1. You put 2 together, you get a dipeptide. You put multiple together, you get a polypeptide, or what we usually call a protein. The only other help I'm going to give you down here is this last word, ACE. Remember, ose was sugar. And our goal is we take the sugar and we destroy it in small pieces. To do that, we need proteins that tend to end in ACE. So if I eat maltose, I need maltase to destroy it. Maltase is an enzyme. If I eat the sugar amylose, which is like starch and stuff, I need amylase to destroy it. So whenever you hear the word ACE, that is another word for protein. So now let's do its function. I don't know what you want me to tell you on protein function, except it's probably the most important thing in the world. Everything we are is proteins. So this is just a list of everything we do. So we use protein for blood and muscles and milk and antibodies and insulin and hormones and hair and skin and eyes, and everything you are is protein. So we don't usually use protein for energy. We use it for structure to build things. Okay. Next dude, lipids. Lipids is a scientific name for fats. Fats have 2 key parts. They have this 3-carbon building block, which we call a glycerol. And then they have these backbones coming off. There's 3 of them called fatty acids. Definitely organic. Holy shnikes. Look at all the carbon. Look at all the hydrogens. Fats definitely look different than everybody else. Okay. If you get really good, you get to look at fats and look at the fatty acid tails, and you can tell a lot of things. In class, we're going to go into more detail on this, but this video, I'm just touching the basics. If every carbon is completely full, see I have links on each side, a bond in each one, that's called a saturated fat, which in class we'll learn come from animals, tend to be unhealthy for us, are solid at room temperature. If I have a big empty space in my fatty acid tail, see how there's hydrogens missing? They went to go party and got in trouble. Okay, that is an unsaturated fats, which generally comes from plants or fish. Okay, fish oils tend to be liquid at room temperature and tend to be better for us. So in class, we're going to have a good discussion on saturated versus unsaturated fats. Now, its main function. Done. Fats have the most energy. Test question, 1,000 test questions. The most energy out of all the organic compounds. Remember, carbohydrates are my quickest form of energy, but fats are by fat the most. Okay, so that is your function of lipids. Okay, last organic compound. This video is done. This is a nucleic acid. Now, this is the forgotten one of the 4. The reason why it's forgotten is because you never eat these guys. You eat carbs, lipids, and proteins all day, every day. You don't eat nucleic acid very much. And here's why. This is a picture of a nucleotide, which is the smallest piece of a nucleic acid. It looks somewhat familiar because check it out. There's a ring right here. Wait, that's a sugar. And then there's an NH2 here. You know what NH2 is. That's an amino. I haven't taught you this much yet, but the number 1 fat in human bodies is a fat called a phospholipid, where we have phosphorus, a phosphate group attached to lipids. Okay. So if you look, the reason why you don't eat a nucleotide is because he is 1/3 protein, 1/3 carbohydrates, 1/3 fat. So as long as you eat these three, you can eat as much nucleotides as you want, or you can make as many nucleotides as you want. Now, the reason why you care about nucleotides so much is because they can form really cool stuff. For example, let's go back to that one. They form your DNA. They form your DNA. Your DNA is made up of a series of nucleotides. Now, if you've had any biology class on the planet, you know that DNA is 4 letters, A, G, C, N, T. That's where these guys come in. The phosphate's always the same. The sugar's always the same. It's this base that varies. There's only 4 bases. There's A's, C's, G's, and T's. Those are the 4 bases. Now, why do I have dinucleotide over here? Well, there's one nucleotide there. There's another one there. If you put them together, it's dinucleotide. I bet you can't guess what you call it when you get 3 or more together. It's called a polynucleotide, or most commonly just called DNA or RNA. The last bullet point you need to know on this one is ATP. Now, if I could cover up the screen, I would, but I can't. This is a nucleotide here. You got your sugar ring. You got one of the bases, in this case, the letter A, ACGT, and you have a phosphate group. But the problem is you don't have one. So let's go back to my nucleotide. If I go back to my nucleotide, you only have one phosphorus group here. But I don't have one. In this case, I have 1, 2, 3. Wow, that's cool. So this is like a super amped up nucleotide. We call this super amped up nucleotide ATP. The P stands for stands for phosphate groups. The T stands for how many you have. Mono is 1, di is 2, tri is 3. So since I have 3, this is called adenosine, which is the base, triphosphate. In class, we're going to talk about this guy all the time. Here's ATP. You have 3 phosphates, but that's a stored form of energy. That's your cell phone at 100%. If I break off one of the phosphate groups, it falls off. Now I have ADP. D stands for di, because now I only have 2. That's when you wake up in the morning and you forget you charge your cell phone, and so you're already at 50% before the day begins. ADP still has energy, but not as much as ATP does. So whenever we talk about ATP, we're talking about the 3-phosphate form. ADP, we're talking about the 2-phosphate form. And AMP, which is adenosine monophosphate, is just another name for a nucleotide. Well, guys, that is the end of Unit 2. I hope you had a wonderful time. Do me a favor, get this quiz, knock it out. Good luck. The answer key is coming up shortly, and I hope you continue to come back and learn and study as much as you can. Thanks for learning. Good luck. Oh, no answer key. Hold on. All right, now we're ready to go. So why don't you guys do me a favor, look over these questions really quick. Go ahead and jot down the answers and see how well you do. And the answer key is coming up next, and have a wonderful day.